Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Good morning. Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining me up here. We were just talking, and I think it would be helpful for everyone to better understand what Maesa is, how it started, and where you all are going. Who wants to take that one?
Erin.
Erin, you gave a good response earlier.
I love the story of Maesa. So I'm often asked this: how did Maesa start? And interestingly enough, the company started in Paris in 1997 as a private label fragrance business. And two of the founders wanted to tap into the U.S. market in the early 2000s. They met a couple guys who were running a packaging company, and so came to life this company called Maesa that we know and love today. So over the years, we see that fragrance and packaging continue to live and breathe very much as a unique asset for us as a company.
Yeah, and fast forward to now.
Okay.
So started off from private label roots, packaging design, fragrances superpower. About 8 or so years ago, I think one of the original founders of Maesa had this epiphany, well, we're doing this for others, why shouldn't we just do it for ourselves? And so was born the first really successful brand that they launched was Kristin Ess at Target, which is a hair care brand. It's a top-ranked brand at Target and continues to be a top-ranked brand at Target. And so that just kind of sort of catapulted this business model that we're discussing today, which is owned brands. So Kristin Ess was the first brand that came through, then came Heritage by Mindy McKnight. Now we have a very successful brand with Ashley Tisdale being Frenchie. So those are some of our founder-led businesses. And then we have now some non-founder-led businesses as well, which is as we're maturing our business model. Finery, Mix Bar, Cozy Place, some of our non-founder-led fragrance brands that have been really disruptive in the mass market space as well. So, in a nutshell, if I were to say today, I saw Alex's eyes rolling. I was like, okay, I need to make a nutshell point here. We are incubator and operator. So incubator means we are creating new brands. So we still launch new brands. We've actually a new brand launching in about 2 weeks. Can't share much right now, but it's coming up and it's so exciting. And yet we continue to operate brands that we launched 8 years ago and beyond. So 4 of our brands are now passing $100 million threshold this year. So really when you think about the two together of incubation and operation, there isn't anyone like it in the industry today who does both.
I think that's amazing. That's an amazing story, by the way. And congratulations on all of the success. I mean, all right. So now you all have created this basically brand incubator that then turns brands into powerhouses. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you all kind of figure out what's the unmet need? Where do you say, okay, this is the inflection point, founder-led brand, let's bring it to market. How do you decide on that? That's got to be really tough.
Yeah, no, it's, we use these 2 words often at Maesa. It's called earned gut. So what it is that there is, of course, a lot of science to it. And I'll share the science with you and the retailer partnerships that help us guide it. But at the end of the day, a lot of what we do is also art, right? So that's where the earned gut becomes very important, which is in your gut when you feel something strongly. And that just builds over time. That just builds from having done it many, many years, because sometimes you're placing bets, right? You're placing bets on trends, which ones are going to take off versus not. So that's where there's a little bit of that earned gut comes in, and that's just a talent piece. But subtracting from that, just taking a high level view, first and foremost, like consumer insights, right? Consumers before marketers. We're all consumers of beauty and personal care products. So it just starts from watching what's happening at the macro trends to the point of looking at what's going on in our politics, what's going on in geography, what's happening in demographics. And like literally we go so high level in terms of just how the world around us is starting to shape. Then you start to bring it a level down and you say, okay, what is the impact of that macro world on beauty trends? How are women and men going to start viewing themselves through the eyes of beauty? Right? Whether that's hair, your face, your body, what are the things that are happening, even the impacts of Ozempic, if you will, right, on every aspect of our aesthetic and look and so on. And then we come down to these micro trends, right, which we believe are probably micro right now, but would become big over time as we are watching the demographics and the markets evolving. And that's where the bets come in, right? And that's where, in partnership with Erin and the team, and I'm sure she's going to speak a lot about the retailer partnership, as we narrow down these micro trends, say from a very high level of 20 to 30, we're always watching, comes down to 10, then it comes down to about 5, that we believe, depending on different retailer partners, different product assortments, where do we think is there a white space in the market? We're constantly reading data. We're reading prestige market data. We're reading mass market data. We're looking at all the trend reports that the industry is reading. And then sort of kind of connecting the dots across the board and all of that. And then we go to the retailers, right, in the kitchen. And that's when...
Yeah. It's I'm not a legacy marketer. I am the poster child salesperson. So I will just say overall, the way the marketing team, and specifically what we call the blue sky team, which is our innovation team, thinks about trends is so incredibly unique, because they are looking not just at data points, but passionately just connecting with consumers at a granular level, listening to podcasts, doing social listening, and starting to see these trends emerge. And they will come to us. And then when we start to put some of the business cases together of like, okay, well, what are we thinking from a price point standpoint, formats, how these products can come to life, it becomes clear where that product would then show up in the market. All the way from a prestige price point to a digital experience to, honestly, we didn't mention a brand. We have a brand called Cozy Place. It's a brand that we co-developed with Dollar General. It's $3 to $5, and it's in the air care category. So it is in a very sleepy category where someone's going to get, Febreze, a Glade plug-in, and you're bringing something really beautiful and accessible to a low-income shopper. So starting to piece that together, and the real hook of success is when we ask ourselves, does it exist today there? And if the answer is no, then you've found something truly magical.
Erin, can you expand on that? Does it exist today?
Does it exist today? Like that concept you're thinking about, does it exist in that category at that retailer for that consumer today? And if the answer is yes, you're not going to get a lot of excitement around what you're going to do with a retail partner, because they're thinking, great, this is nice, but I sort of already have that. There's nothing incremental to that. And I think oftentimes companies actually only look at the category specifically and say, well, this is what's trending, this item or this format or this fragrance. So I'm going to go copy and paste and bring that. And there's not a lot of excitement in that, but in categories where you say there's not mass fragrance today, that's where you go and you have something winning. Now, what makes it hard on the commercial side is, so how big is this going to be? Yeah. You don't have a lot to benchmark off of. So like that format and that tube at that price point, what do we think it's going to move? So the operational side of our business is really fascinating, because you have to have the agility and the operational excellence to be able to scale and react quickly, because some things will work. Obviously, we have an incredible track record of that. 2 out of every 3 brands we launch is successful. As Osh said, very young organization, and we have 4 brands crossing $100 million this year. But you have to have the agility to scale up fast, and you also have to have the agility to fail fast, because not everything works as well.
Got it. So all right, so I have a couple follow-up questions. All right, so my first one is, what does Oshiya's team arm you with when you go to pitch a retailer, right? So you're going to pitch Dollar General. What's in your toolkit as a salesperson that you're like, okay, this is going to close this deal?
So we are not very much of a siloed organization. It's not like an Oshiya's team or this team. It's really like there's a group of us, and we live on planes and the road together, and we're out doing our thing. And
she's riding along to the meeting with you.
Oh yeah. Like you asked us before, like, how are you two going to do this? We're like, we just do this.
No, this is what we do. Yeah.
We just kind of get out there. So, we, all jokes aside, there are different times in which we do that engagement. Sometimes it's all the way from that macro point Oshiya talked about, where it's like we kind of have something in our head. What do we think this could do? And we'll have a connection with a retailer, and we'll be like, "Hey, we're in town. We're doing this other meeting, but you want to go walk a store?" And we've had meetings where we'll have brands where we literally walk some stores. We're like, "Oh, what about this? What are you thinking? This is why we think there's an opportunity for this here. What do you think?" And then we'll say, "Okay, let's follow up. We'll get some conceptual ideas together, some mixes." And sometimes it's not one specific concept. It might be 2, 3 concepts. And then we go from there. And that ideation of how we then take our, sales and marketing team in tandem at every single meeting and email together, bringing that to life, is a bit of the secret sauce of like, can't tell you too much that we do.
I think that's amazing. I love that. Oshiya, from your standpoint, when you're looking at meeting with these retailers, when you've got Erin in market, I know I have CPG roots as well. It's about 20 years old, but having sat in some of these meetings with the procurement folks, like they're asking, what's the marketing plan look like? What weight are you putting against it? You guys are operating kind of startup brands, right? And so I assume your tactics are not just GRPs on TV.
Nope.
And how does that go over when you're meeting with some of these old school retail folks, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. Actually, we have a very unique and a differentiated go-to-market as well, because as you can imagine, when a brand, and I also come from large CPGs, and so does Erin. We share the alma mater. When you're talking about a brand that has 85%, 90% awareness, what you have to do to move the needle on that with every percentage point is just a very different go-to-market and a media plan, right? And at that point in time, also your brand has likely been around for a very long time. So in its life stage is probably at a plateau phase, right? So you really are trying to build that consumer desire, and your percentage of spends are a lot higher. You're spending more in paid because it's harder to get people to push your brand for free. For us, it's the opposite end of the spectrum. We're birthing brands and we're bringing them to the $10 million threshold and the $50 million threshold and the $100 million threshold, and then we're scaling them beyond that, right? So what it takes for the first 100 is not necessarily what it takes for the next 100. And why I say that is that when I think about the marketing or the go-to-market plans, first and foremost, we fill the funnel at the bottom, right? Our packaging designs are super strong. Our products, we know, are tapping into a real consumer need. There's a white space that the retailers really believe in. So right off the bat, we get a lot of point of sale disruption. So first and foremost, we invest in our in-store displays and all of the in-store opportunities that our teams can land, right? So that is the number one way we spend our dollars. Then you go further up and you say, okay, beyond this, beyond the retailer environment and all of the paid within their environment, what else can we do from an owned perspective, where, how do we build a heat for our brand? But one that we've really, really built an infrastructure around is the earned aspect of it, which when you're at a large company, it's very hard to do because you have now scaled. People know you have very large P&Ls. You have hundreds of millions of dollars that you're spending. It's just a different mindset. So people want to be paid to talk about your brands versus the brands that we have, because they're desirable, they're cool, they're young, they're indie, they're fun. People want to talk about them, but even when we're not watching them. And that is where the highest ROI for our brands comes in. So earned influencer marketing, getting social media engagement going across all of our brands. The sentiment is so positive, and we are constantly measuring the sentiment of our brands. And not only that, we're constantly measuring our earned media value ranks and how we are performing versus competition, because that gives me share of voice comparison, right? Which in large CPGs, you do SOV analysis through brand health equity pyramids that Kantar or Millward Brown would run for you. For us, this is our way of understanding share of voice. Am I climbing the ranks? That means, am I outshouting everyone else in the social media landscape, right? So those are some of the ways we differentiate. And of course, we have paid, but paid is so low compared to larger CPG companies.
And I think that's another point, again, a bit of like outsider looking in, that that is so unique here is that in the development process, I think oftentimes you think like, what's the price? What's the product? What does this look like? But actually very early on for us, as we think about brands and truly like being new, relevant, white space, fresh, you start to see how the talkability of that brand can come to life and in a social way. I mean, I was not on TikTok. I have to be on TikTok because it is so fun to watch our brands go viral because consumers love to talk about them. So seeing how your tone of voice of that brand, that item, that product comes to life in a digital environment, I think has also been a bit unique and very exciting way in which it all comes together at Maesa.
So, all right. So obviously there's kind of this social monitoring. You guys are getting all the social listening back. You're seeing your share of voice. I don't know about a share of voice on TikTok, but share of voice in general in the category. How do you then translate that to actual sales, right? Because you can have viral moments and it doesn't sell anything, right? And so that
rarely happens, by the way. When something goes viral, you do sell. It's absolutely proven.
This is a real problem for us.
It's actually a real problem. When something goes viral, yes, it blows through your forecast.
And then you don't have any product left in the
and then you have to be like, hey,
influencer boxes, and then you gotta
it's faster.
Yeah. It's the bane of our existence. But when something goes viral, by the way,
these are negative words. Let me clarify. Yeah. These are wonderful problems to have.
Class problem
that we regularly, weekly seem to tackle.
Yeah, that's very true. But I would say that actually virality is the most direct attribution to sales.
Interesting.
When something goes viral, more often than not, it will absolutely translate into sales. Yeah. However, attribution is hard, period. You're in ad tech, right? Attribution is hard, even when you have paid, right? It's hard, period. That's the existential crisis all the marketers deal with. Well, what did you do to drive sales? Well, everything, but hey.
It's all me.
But attribution is hard regardless. And when it comes to earned, you can imagine it's even harder, right?
Yeah.
So if you're asking me for an attribution marketing mix modeling, there isn't one. But I think how we sort of triangulate our information is when you look at a few different KPIs and it tells you a story, right? So you look at your brand health, right? You see, and you're constantly monitoring on a quarterly basis, are your brands moving in the right space when it comes to awareness? And very important for younger brands, consideration, right? Because if you're not in the consideration set, there is no point driving awareness because that means you don't have the right.
So are you running brand studies kind of constantly in market, or how are you getting that feedback?
Yeah. So we're looking at some AI tools as well for this, but for now, yes, the old school survey-based brand health studies. So it's constantly just fielding those and getting a sense, and are we directionally going in the right direction, right?
Okay.
Then we are measuring the social engagements that are happening in the world, and we are big on UGC. While I speak of influencers, I think of them as user-generated. And as to what Erin said, our product is so cool, people want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So sometimes just by being listed on shelves and being cool, people go pick up the product and they create TikToks, and sometimes the things that go viral are user content, right? Then when something's working, you fuel that further with your influencer media and your own social channels, and where you have founders with founders. And that then really, really builds that out. So for me, personally speaking, and it's purely anecdotal, when my sales team would reach out to me and say, something's going on, this thing's having double, triple digit growth, but we are not on display. We're not running a promo. Do you know what's happening? Okay, let's go check if there is an influencer piece that went viral, or there's a content piece that's right now getting all the traction. And sure enough, oftentimes there is some sort of a linkage right like that. So it's not to say, oh, that specific piece drove that and that's the attribution of the sale. You can't measure it. But I think for me here, the point is around quantum of content you're generating.
Yeah, it's what's so interesting. You didn't touch on this. When we see that, oftentimes our teams are pretty well equipped. We'll come in. I'm thinking of an item that in December that went incredibly viral. It was like a texture spray, a heat protectant spray, and somebody on TikTok used it in an example. and was flat ironing receipts. If you haven't seen this, you got to check out this TikTok.
Yeah.
It's a cool little trend. And one of our products there, we're like, we don't know what's going on. And you came in and it wasn't necessarily like that video did it. It was like all these other influencers were getting involved. So even if you search that one item or you try to find that 10 million posts or, hearts, whatever, like you can't find it. But if you look hard enough, you see actually 100 people posted about this. And in aggregate, that actually moved the needle for us on that particular item brand. And then obviously there's the halo effect of our portfolio.
That's amazing. In terms of, we've talked a bit about kind of social and that impact. Do you all still, outside of what sounds like in-store, in-aisle promotion, like end caps and stuff, do you still engage in more traditional formats? Do you still buy TV? Do you do CTV? What other formats will you engage in? Or is it like social and search, life or death?
So no. So like I mentioned, and that's just, it's Maesa, but it's also just personally, we always as marketers have to build your funnel bottoms up. Because that's, in the end, what matters is sales. If your business is not growing, if you're not driving revenue, you may have the sexiest marketing plan. It does not matter, right? Like, let's just be honest. It does not matter. So you go bottoms up. So like I said before, anything in store displays we can get, we will absolutely invest in that, right? Brand search dollars, right? There you go. All the brand search, the needs on Amazon's, Target.com, Walmart.com, when the consumer is out there, and these are large retailers with very high household penetration. When people are coming searching for categories and your brands, you have to make sure you're there, right? So that's the second form of paid. Where, as I was saying, for the first 100 versus the next 100, when we are crossing the 100 million threshold, we are starting to introduce a bit more sort of like those traditional paid advertising channels. And actually, next week, we're going live with our first CTV linear TV ad.
Oh, wow.
On one of our brands. It's so exciting. We have a partnership coming up. Thank you. I know, this feels like we're wearing the big girl pants. Finally, it's so exciting. So we are going to be on TV with just one channel. Again, when you're talking about a 20% awareness versus 85% awareness, the GRPs you need is just a whole different level. So it's one specific channel that we have a lot of insight, has a high overlap with our consumer base. It's a reality TV show that we believe our consumer is watching. So we were able to get first spots and first commercial place for the reunions and so on and so forth. And then we did a deep partnership with the artist, the reality TV star who's in the show. The ad has her in it. She's going to post about it. So we then took that moment and we made it a Maesa moment. And we said, let's just go full 360. You get one chance. Let's blow it out of the water. Let's hopefully the call that I'm receiving from Erin 2 weeks from now, this thing is working. And we're like, okay, let's go. Let's pump in more money into that. So that is the hope. But yes, starting to, for the brands that have now even crossed $100 million, touching $200 million mark, starting to do those types of paid media tactics.
Interesting. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, good luck with that. It sounds awesome. I hope it's below deck personally, but so in terms of when you're actually looking at going out, you've kind of got these established brands. Are you all starting to look at things from a Maesa portfolio standpoint? Are you considering a portfolio approach to some of these things, or is it very much kind of individualized?
Yeah, so this we have brands that play in categories.
Right.
So we do, like any big company, start to think about overall categories. Big ones we play in obviously are hair care, fragrance, skincare. There's a bit into this wellness, lifestyle. Obviously, the lines of categories are blurring, so it becomes much more difficult to define. But thinking about how that comes to play and being choiceful, because as I always say to everyone, we probably get an influx in any given year of 100 opportunities. And we have to be really mindful of what are the 10 and how do we maximize our resources and make things scalable in a big way, and thinking through it under that context of category and portfolio. Yep.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know. It's such a startup. It's like, do we do this? Do we not do this? How do we leverage the bulk of our business? All right, we've only got a few minutes left, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. What advice do each of you have for the room? Obviously, you kind of talked about a very data-driven approach to bringing brands to market, to deciding on which brands to take to market. Are there specific data sets that you're looking at, data vendors that you all like? Are there certain things that you would say, hey, if you can do one thing tomorrow, what would you kind of give to the room for that?
I would say be data-driven, but not data constrained. When I was at large CPGs, we looked back a lot. We looked at competition a lot. We looked at what worked in the past. Like, stop it, right? Like, look to the back. Of course, history guides, past informs, and what the competition is doing is very important because it helps you understand where you can win and your strengths and weaknesses. But I think what Maesa does really well, and which I would believe a lot of young brands do really well, is that they look forward. They align themselves to the consumer. They work with a little bit of that gut mixed in with data. So to be data driven, but not data constrained.